And now, can we put the videos, right?
Yes.
In the background. I mean, just leave the poll there and the videos in the background.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Super. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Any response from Veronica?
No, I have sent what.
Okay.
WhatsApp, Teams, email.
Maybe then Clarice offered to step in. Clarice, are you there? I can unmute you. Okay, I don't.
So, John, one question. In 2 more minutes, at 5, I mean, at 3, at 15 hours, I can just start talking. And I mean, we are all connected, and everyone should be there, right?
Yeah, I'm just, hold on, please. I'm just giving Clarice.
Yeah, of course, of course. It's just to let me know, please, when I can start, just to be sure.
2 minutes. I'm trying to make sure we go on time.
Okay, okay. No, I'm just asking because I'm not sure. I cannot see myself here, so.
Clarice, are you there? You can unmute yourself.
1, 2, 3.
Hold on, I'm sorry, Clarice. I thought I had. Okay, please try now.
Hi, I'm here.
Okay, could you, you offered earlier, could you step in and do the recording of the floor, please?
Yeah, I can record for Vero.
Okay, super. So in the interpretation block, just select off.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Make sure your mic and camera are shut off. Okay. Julian, I think from my side, it's all set. Okay.
Super.
Yep.
UNTAD, Trade Facilitation e-learning platform, was launched in February 2021, making our empowerment program for national trade facilitation committees a hybrid learning environment. The COVID-19 pandemic accelerated this process, moving the program to a total virtual setting for the time being. The platform has been developed with the support of international experts and is available in English, French, Spanish, and Portuguese. In 2021, more than 1,000 decision makers in trade facilitation have accessed the platform and honed their trade facilitation skills. Participants from 27 countries benefited from the 10 self-paced modules that, for the time being, are available on the platform. They include 150 videos, 60 quizzes, handouts, and further readings to support participants in their e-learning journey. Accompanying the 10 e-learning modules, 195 webinars were organized. In these virtual events, international and national experts adapt the key learned concept to each country's reality, allowing trade facilitation stakeholders to dive deeper into each of these topics and solve any doubts they might have. At the end of the course, national stakeholders are required to write a piece reflecting on a trade facilitation related issue while applying some of the concepts they have learned throughout the course. The best articles are published in our Trade Facilitation e-learning blog with a view of enhancing South-South cooperation and exchange best practices. In 2021, 659 participants have graduated from the program, with an almost equal number for women and men graduating. The UNTAD platform also works as a social network platform for trade facilitation practitioners. Committee members can connect and interact with each other using the community features of the platform. According to the final evaluations completed by the participants, 95% of participants affirm that the course has helped them significantly improve their knowledge on trade facilitation. 95% of participants affirm too that they now feel more comfortable applying trade facilitation principles and concepts in their daily jobs. After the course, 91% of participants feel in a better position to fulfill their roles as members of the National Trade Facilitation Committee. Congratulations to the program participants. Without their support, these achievements would never have been possible. Sincere thanks also to the partners organizations and experts that have supported the program. For those National Trade Facilitation Committees that have not yet participated in the program, we hope that you will join us. If you think you have learned a lot, wait to see what we are preparing for 2022.
Thank you, and welcome everyone to the fourth session in our Global Forum for National Trade Facilitation Committees. My name is Julian Fraga Campos. I'm an Economic Affairs Officer here at the UNTAD Trade Facilitation section. And before we start, I would like to share with you a few logistics to have an excellent development of our session today. First of all, today we will have, as you can see, we're using the platform Zoom. And to facilitate the job of our moderator and our panelists, I would like to ask you all, if you have any question related to the topic that our panelists will present today, please write your question in the questions and answer section that we have at the bottom in the middle of the options. If you go to you move your mouse in the middle, you will see a question and answer section. Please put your question there. Now, if you are experiencing any trouble or technical difficulties, or you just want to send some greetings or just chit chat with someone, please put all those in the chat section, okay? Also, I would like to ask you at the very end of this session, we will have a very brief poll with one question. I would like to ask you all if you could please respond to this question. I would like also to mention that during the session, we have an artist who will be drawing the findings of the session and will present this at the end. Before heading you to give the floor to the moderator of today, I would like also to thank you all for being present today. I would like to highlight that we have this session translated in English, Spanish, and French. To choose any of these channels, please, in the options too, you will see a globe. If you click on the globe, you can choose any of those 3 channels. So please remember you have this in English, French, and English. So now I will give the floor to our moderator, Mr. Ricardo Triveño Chapa, who is the Deputy Secretary General for the World Customs Organization. Thank you so much, Mr. Triveño, for being with us today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Julian. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, depending on where you are watching us today. It's good to see you. I am Ricardo Treviño, as Julian just mentioned. I'm the Deputy Secretary General of the World Customs Organization. And this panel brings us with 7 different experiences from 7 different speakers representing developing countries, least developed countries as well, and of course other experiences from partners in regard to how we have progressed and what are the lessons learned from COVID-19 pandemic, the use of technology, and the impact that this has had on the National Trade Facilitation Committees, the NTFCs. Of course, during the pandemic, all countries were looking for ways of strengthening the supply chain and ways of promoting facilitation of trade. And it was through the communication with the private sector and through the NTFCs that some of this assessment and information came up to customs administrations in order to really assess how these measures were impacting, improving or not the supply chain and the flow of goods, especially those essential goods. The WCO has been very much in communication with our 184 members. We carried out a survey last year that revealed, of course, that the pandemic inevitably impacted the functioning of the NTFCs. Many of these committees actually were really put their work on hold altogether due to their inability to meet in person, especially at the beginning of the pandemic and before the teleworking and all the infrastructure and was in place, and of course the regulations. So, however, in some instances, the NTFCs played an important role in addressing facilitation priorities during the pandemic and have also benefited from the sense of urgency generated by this crisis. This refers primarily to ensuring facilitation of essential goods, of course, across borders, including the movement of vaccines, and this is still a government-led operation. Through our private sector consultative group, these private sector representatives that meet frequently with the WCO and serve as a good point of contact and to obtain information from the private sector on how customs are performing in different parts of the world. This private sector consultative group, we've been told that the vaccines have been delivered smoothly, and of course we expect this trend to continue. Indeed, many WCO members also highlighted better communication and cooperation between the public and private sector as one of the important benefits in the functioning of the NTFCs, especially during the pandemic. So therefore, the WCO strongly encourages the use of these national committees as an avenue for public and private sector dialogue. An important lesson coming out of the discussions at the TFA regional workshops held last year as well was that there is still a need to strengthen the role of the NTFCs, especially in implementing some of the most challenging provisions in the TFA, such as single window or border agency cooperation. These measures in particular could have an important role in continuing the strong trend of digitalization of border procedures, which has been accelerated in the recent months. The border agency cooperation concept, or as we call it in the WCO, coordinated border management, is one of the top priorities and core functions that customs needs to perform. And this is, of course, highlighted in our Secretariat note on the role of customs in mitigating the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and on vaccines, and as well in the WCO guidelines for disaster management and supply chain continuity. Therefore, of course, the NTFCs are an important platform to foster the coordinated border management topic as such. As regards to digitization, social distancing requirements have prompted customs and business to rely more on available electronic services, including electronic payment, single window, non-intrusive inspection equipment, and to introduce innovative technological solutions, providing new opportunities for facilitating trade, amongst other things. Since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, the WCO has been working tirelessly to support our 184 member customs administrations in performing their key role and through this crisis. We have been supporting our members by providing guidance on measures to be implemented at the border, organizing global enforcement operations, enhancing the cooperation at global and regional levels with other international organizations and private sector associations, and providing capacity building support to implement the relevant international standards and recommendations in the customs domain. Among others, as well, the WCO has been providing support through our Mercator program, which is a multi-year strategic and tailored approach to support countries in the implementation of the TFA. Within this context, the Mercator approach has the support of our HMRC WCO UNCTAD Trade Facilitation Capacity Building Program that brings together the WCO and UNCTAD in a partnership supported by the United Kingdom's Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs. Under this HMRC program, the WCO aims to support middle-income countries such as South Africa and the Philippines, and developing countries such as Lesotho, Liberia, and Zambia on TFA technical measures, as well as organizational development. This, of course, complements with the efforts of UNCTAD in supporting the NTFC's key component of the program's vision. And of course, this helps together the nations, our members, to, in a comprehensive way, tackle many of the challenges that have been faced during the recent months. Today, I appreciate the organization and congratulate UNCTAD and other partners as well as the WCO team for the coordination and organization of this event, which comes in a very, very right moment to discuss about how different members have been presenting challenges and overcoming them in different ways during the last few months, and how the experiences of the national trade facilitation committees have responded to the COVID-19 pandemic. We will hear from Mongolia, Paraguay, Peru, Vanuatu, and Zimbabwe, and of course, from our colleagues of Trademark East Africa, which will also present their experience. Now, we are gonna open this panel today with the first speakers, and I now open the floor, give the floor to the representatives of the Mongolian General Customs Administration. I give the floor to Ms. Sensuren Dava, Senior Customs Officer, and Ms. Dulgun Ekbatar, Customs Officer, as well from the International Cooperation Division of Mongolian Customs General Administration. Welcome, and the floor is yours.
Good morning and good afternoon, good evening, my dear colleague. Thank you, Deputy Secretary General, for the nice, very comprehensive and beginning of the session 4. Today, we would like to share about the Mongolia's COVID-19 response and during the pandemic. It is not only in case of the Mongolia, but also many other countries we have faced it for the biggest challenge, which is restricted border movements. Therefore, it is very difficult for how we can facilitating trade for just ongoing activities. Our topics today, we will presenting about the three kind of the topics. And first one, it's like thanks for the UNCTAD for selecting in Mongolia for participating NTFC for empowerment program. One of the part of this program is like rapid scan, ongoing, the evaluating ongoing current situation of the legislation and measures. Then today and yesterday, we heard about for the reform track, this wonderful project for we can controlling all of the activities for in line with the trade facilitation agreement. Rapid scan, it's the preliminary result of the rapid scan. Before the starting of the rapid scan, it consists on the desk research of the legal study. And in case of the Mongolia today, we have using for the more than 300 legal documents, including for the international convention and customs and other related documents. And also during the COVID-19, in case of Mongolia, we don't have that kind of the crises before. Then the competent authority, they just adopted the 123 documents, which is preventive measure and also mitigating risk of the trade and transport related activities for during the COVID-19. Then also 1/3 of them related to the trade and transport. Then rapid scan is consistent of 5 sections, and first one is like the background information. The survey participated 153 the participants from the both public and private sector. There is a good result is that except for the background information, all 4 categories, the people has responded between the 74 and 86%. It is good result, we can just communicating for them. There is a majority of them as women participants, it's sharing for the 57, and from the public sector, the Mongolia is located between Russia and Mongolia, landlocked country, therefore we have the 46 border crossing points, and who is working at the border crossing points, those for the different agency, the government agency and internal or regional agency people is participate our survey. One of the positive things is that regarding the policy methodology of the survey, it is our findings not only for the based on the just feedback from the respondents, but after that, once we received all of the questionnaire by the program, then we made a number of the individual and the focus meeting within the participants. Then there is many challenges as people has shared. Then biggest challenge is transport. Even today and yesterday, even trade facilitation, we're talking about the simplification, standardization, everything. Then especially during the COVID-19, there is a transport issues, very big challenge for especially for the landlocked country. There is many international documents and convention, they would like to freedom of the transit for the countries, but during the COVID-19, there is a biggest challenge for them. Therefore, it's increasing time and cost of all of the international trade transit movement. Then government policy, procedure and capacity building, IT, those things is to get a sharing for the biggest sharing for the main challenges. Then second and third section of the questionnaire, we're asking about the knowledge about the regulation and measures, how they can respond and what they can just giving us the feedback of them. Then you can see here the 3.4, it's like the government agency responsible to very quickly and relatively quickly for implementing all of the legal the activities which is a decision by the government. Therefore, we would like to recommend like that government decision before the adopting of the documents, they need to close cooperate with the private sector, especially who is the stakeholder of the international trade supply chain. It is also included WTO trade facilitation agreement. The fourth category of the survey, it's like more the close-ended question. It is like the people is shared very transparency and very nicely about the ongoing activity, how they impacted for them. It is some of them is very positive result. As you can see here, there is a digital document, the signature is like increased, but even it's already the government is like introduced it, but some of the people, they don't know about that one. Then category 4, we asked about the challenges, what kind of the challenges during the implementation of those legal document and measures. It's good things is that they're just sharing all of the things like very openly and very nicely, and even they give us some kind of the comments how they can improve for the further improvement of those adopted activities. And fifth question is like a fifth category about the relevant regulation measures of the regional activity. Unfortunately, the participant, they even not only for the public sector, but also the private sector, they don't know about the regional relevant regulations. It's good things is that they know about all of the WCO document, WTO and UN document. Then another thing is that then we need to recommend for they need to introduce a capacity building development program, public awareness program. Then last section, we just introduced about the recommendation, which is for the crisis response, just ongoing activity. They just found for the challenges. Then another good things is that all of the government agency, the resource mobilization is very important, but they using that one very nicely. It is very good opportunity for them. Then another positive thing is online transaction, online payment is increased. My colleague Dulgun will introduce about the digital activities. Then also majority of them, it's like shared us for the challenges and comments and for the improvement, because we selected all of the participants. It's from the private sector, especially from the international freight forwarder and customs broker and trader, exporter and importer. Therefore, we chosen for the right people for our survey. Therefore, it is we very happy for the people responded our questionnaire. Then final recommendation is based on the 5 challenges. It's like you can see here the transport. Then even many Mongolian exceeded international document, especially for the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement, and Article 11 is mentioned about the freedom of the transit. Therefore, from the third countries, all of the transit for the transit, the shipment, it's like stayed at the Russian, even the Mongolian Chinese border. It is like the very huge queue for them. It is increasing domestic, the supply of the goods. Then because in Mongolia international trade structures, the highly dependent from the neighboring country. The second one, government policy, because during the pandemic, it is one of the positive things is that they decreasing, eliminating for the border controlling the agencies. Since January 1st of this year, and border quarantine officers is merged to the customs. Then it is one of the positive things. And the procedure, then also capacity building and IT is that we are recommending for under the finding of this survey. I would like to hand to my colleague Dulgun share about what kind of the digital response during the COVID-19 lesson learned in Mongolia.
All right, thank you. On the development of the policy and the regulation.
Okay. During the COVID-19, Mongolian government focused on the development of the policy and regulation enabling digital environment, as from the slide. This policy document addresses the trade facilitation and its development. E-Mongolia system has been developed and introduced within the framework of the government long-term policy Vision 2050 and the government action plan, which complies and integrates government services, provide easy and smooth round-clock access. Now allows individuals and companies obtain more than 2,000 public services throughout the system. The public and traders can access the export and transit activities requirements, including permission, license, quotas, payment, etc. Next, we would like to highlight about the Mongolian customs modernization and its operations to the operation transition to the digitalization during the pandemic. In framework of this project, Mongolian Custom introduced the WCO data model 3.7, also implemented integrated national merchandise registration system and launched the e-clearance system. Also, the biggest achievement during the pandemic, Mongolia launched the Mongolian Trade Information Portal with the assistance of World Bank Group and IFC. This portal provides all the information on the trade, such as export and transit procedures, legal documents to the domestic and the international trades with the no fees. Mongolia exchange information with the neighboring countries. For instance, exchange e-manifest with the China customs and exchange customs declaration and X-ray information with the Russian customs. Also, the biggest achievement in Mongolian customs has been introduced the customs targeting center. This targeting center has the, approximately 1,200 surveillance camera covering all of the border crossing points and customs clearance section and terminals. Also, Mongolian custom introduced the international tools. This the biggest example is WCO data model of the new version. Mongolian customs able to exchange information between region, eliminate duplicated data, reduce cost of the operation, and increase interoperability between intergovernment agencies and private sectors. Under this project, Mongolian customs launched the self-declarance system beginning of the 2021, and more than 3,700 individuals and companies and registered in the self-declarance system as for now, and all the customs clearance stages all automated. And the result of this, it has been decreased the face-to-face relation.
Excuse me, I'm jumping here.
The system also offers traders to access their trade-related histories and their own statements without any fees.
Hi, Dulgun, please.
In nationwide, we have learned so much during the pandemic, and we are still in the progress of the digitalizations. In the future, we are going to more focus on the raise of public awareness of the digital transition and revise national legislation, improve capacity building. As I mentioned before, border quarantine department merging with the customs administration now. And we also need to do business process reengineering and get more advanced level of the customs cooperations, coordination of the government policies, build single window electronic environment, and coordination of the government policies, also create a favorable legal environment for the freedom of transit. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, and leave your questions in Q&A section, we will happy to answer it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much to the representatives of the Authority of Customs in Mongolia. This was, of course, a very impressive progress done by the customs administrations on the digital part, and of course the closeness and the survey, which strengthens the coordination and communication with stakeholders. So congratulations on this. Very good presentation. And now I will go to our next speaker, who will present the experience from Paraguay. He's Enrique Carrillo Gomez, the Director of Economic Multilateral Organizations in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Paraguay. Enrique, please, the floor is yours. And I will just remind speakers to please stick to the time allowed, so that we don't go further than the time expected. Thank you, Enrique. The floor is yours.
Muchas gracias, señor Treviño, y muchas gracias por sus
comentarios,
your introductory remarks. I should also like to extend my thanks to Ms. Sinsuren and Ms. Engpaka from Mongolia. It's always fantastic to hear experiences from other countries, other developing countries, particularly those that are landlocked developing countries like Paraguay. Let me talk to you about the experiences and challenges that Paraguay has had during the pandemic in terms of trade facilitation. First of all, I will take you through our National Trade Facilitation Committee in Paraguay. This is a public-private forum for discussion and coordination for the implementation of the Trade Facilitation Agreement and other international standards related to trade facilitation in Paraguay. It was created by a provision, a presidential decree from the executive in 2017, April, in fact. And it brings together 27 public institutions and 15 of the main unions and associations of the private sector that are linked to international trade. In terms of the pandemic, then, our main challenge that the National Trade Facilitation Committee had to face was to ensure the cross-border flow of goods and to keep that moving. To achieve that goal, we had to reorganize our bureaucratic structures within the committee, and we had to carry out digitization and simplification of procedures linked to foreign trade. Among the initiatives that were carried out during the pandemic to do that, we established we reorganized the NTFC, and I think you can get an idea from the table in front of you. Before the restructuring that was done with the help of UNCTAD, the NTFC had several ad hoc committees between the public and the private sectors to identify priorities for trade facilitation. Subsequently, the reorganization took place, and there is now central coordination headed by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which carries out the coordination together with the technical secretariat of the National Trade Facilitation Committee. We also established 3 groups on thematic work. There's a working group on simplification of procedures. There's a group on transparency and trade information, and there is one on facilitation of trade of agro-fishery products. So in each of these subgroups, they're chaired and they're done together with the public and the private sectors. We have in each of these working groups the various public institutions and the unions and associations from the private sector who have interest related to each of the committees. Now, these meet periodically. The different groups meet once a fortnight, once a month sometimes, and the committees hold plenary sessions from 4 to 6 times a year. This new format has been hugely helpful in restructuring our National Trade Facilitation Committee, and we've been implementing that to date. Another initiative that we implemented during the pandemic, as a consequence of the pandemic really, was the simplification of customs declarations procedures. We reduced the number of steps that were required in person, the number of things that had to be done in person, and we also increased the number of digital steps that could be taken. This had a huge impact in terms of cutting the amount of in-person activity that was done. You just have to do one thing in person now to file a customs declaration. It also cut the time it took to issue documentation from the public sector for declaring goods. It cuts it down from 30 minutes to just 1 minute. A further initiative that was carried out during the pandemic as a direct consequence of it was the digital phytosanitary certification, e-phyto. And this was done in collaboration essentially with Argentina and their National Department on Vegetable and Seed Quality and Health. We have we've ensured that our phytosanitary certificates tie in with those of Argentina. They are in line with them. And this is something that we're testing and we're trying out with the United States, and we're hoping to roll this out to our trade with Chile and Japan as well. We have also, during the pandemic, and as I say, as a direct consequence of it, we've been implementing an authorized economic operators program. This is under the National Customs Directorate. And with this program, we have been coordinating 7 governmental institutions on border monitoring aside from customs, so that non-customs related, so that companies related to foreign trade, dealing with foreign trade, they can get priority treatment and they can have advanced treatment when it comes to dealing with customs procedures, border procedures, as well as the physical documentation checks. This has led to a cut in the time and the costs of non-tariff measure, non-customs related measures in terms of release and clearance of goods, as well as focusing on companies related to dealing with international trade. It brings minimum security and traceability standards to the economic activity there, and it's done in such a way that the procedures for customs monitoring are simplified. This has been done essentially, as I say, by the border control officers themselves, but also by other bodies tasked with verifying and monitoring food security and standards, for example, a safe and secure transport, for example, and the use of certain raw materials in production. Lastly, I'd like to move to setting out briefly the main challenges that we've experienced across the timescale of the pandemic, focusing essentially on the need to better coordinate the cooperation that we received from our partners. At different times, we were enjoying cooperation with UNCTAD for the restructuration of our National Trade Facilitation Committee, and we were also receiving assistance from the International Executive Service Corps for implementation of the phytosanitary certification, the digital certificate that I talked about, e-phyto, and we've also received cooperation from the Department of Agriculture of the United States on implementation or broadening, expanding the authorized economic operators program. So this coordination is ongoing. Coordination is vital. Permanent communication among the partners that we're cooperating with is truly essential. We also need to take into account and make sure we utilize special and differentiated trade mechanisms, ensuring the prevalence of trade facilitation agreements and so on. So it's another important challenge that we have experienced in the pandemic in general, and I think this is something that will now remain a huge challenge, is the need to collaborate closely with trade partners with a view to establishing and to promoting mirror measures. These trade facilitation measures if they're implemented, they also need to be reciprocated in other jurisdictions by other trade partners. Given that we have seen during the pandemic that the fluidity of trade flows and goods flows is vital, and to ensure that international trade continues, that these things are closely linked to the will of trade partners to implement these measures effectively. This is a challenge that I think is extremely important and that does take on particular importance for landlocked developing countries like Paraguay, who must collaborate with transit countries on trade facilitation measures. It's absolutely essential. We have no choice there. So I would just truly underline the importance of mirror measures, coordination with our main trade partners to ensure that the trade facilitation measures are truly effective and that they're implemented effectively during the pandemic. My thanks very much indeed, Mr. Trevino, for giving us this time. We will leave, here's our contact information for our NTFC, should anyone have any concerns or questions or comments that they might like to share with us subsequently. Thank you.
For your experience of Paraguay, and we do hope that at the end of the presentations we will have time for questions and answers. So we hope that you will stay online in order to be able to respond to some questions. Now I'd like to give the floor to the coordinator of Customs and Facilitation of Trade of the Minister of External Trade and Tourism of Peru, Ingrid Huaypaipinhuicon. You have the floor. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I will be sharing my screen with you. 1 second, please.
Hola, Ingrid. Sí, se me escucha.
Oh,
Te escuchamos y te vemos.
yes, we can see you and we can hear you.
No puedo, no sé por qué no puedo compartir mi presentación.
Sure why I am unable to share the presentation with you. I'd like to ask the organizers whether they can help us, perhaps.
Organizadores, ¿tendrán ustedes la presentación de Ingrid?
Yes, perhaps I can ask the technicians to help us with the presentation by Ingrid.
A ver, un segundo, por favor, creo que ya había problema.
¿No?
No, no.
¿La puedes hacer sin tu apoyo?
Sí.
¿O sí?
And
Porque
you
ya
can
nos consumimos algunos minutos.
without the slides. Oh yes, now we have the slides on the screen, says the moderator.
Julián.
Thank you. Thank you, Julian.
Buenas tardes con todos. Disculpen la.
So good afternoon, and I apologize for the slight delay. I'd like to thank you for this opportunity for me to share with you the information related to the progress achieved in Peru in digitalizing the different processes during the pandemic. Next slide, please. As in most countries, most developing countries, we have seen that the foreign trade sector saw a drop in 2020, and what happened in Peru was a drop of about 15%, both related to exports and imports. Next slide, please. And the slide shows that there were some problems in the logistical chain of foreign trade related to the different procedures imposed related to the presence of the people during the different processes, leading to disruptions in the chain. And next slide, please. And in this context, the members of the National Committee, which is called the Multi-Sectoral Commission for the Facilitation of Foreign Trade, COMUFAL, the Commission took several measures, mostly related to proposals for new norms and modifications to the law that created the Commission, and broadening the functions of the National Committee. And the main three are related to the digitalization of the different processes related to logistics and the environment related to these processes, and also creation of a system of a single window. And we have a special team dealing with questions of digitalization. And this new norm gave the private sector the possibility to participate in the work of the National Committee. And today, the representatives of the different operators in foreign trade and producers are also members of this committee. Next slide, please. Also, as I mentioned, we developed 4 specific norms that led to the improvement of trade facilitation in Peru. The first one was the Legislative Decree 1492 that has as its objective the reactivation and continuation of trade activities. And there's a second norm is legislative decree related to the strengthening of the single window related to foreign trade that covers now new services that are provided to trade operators. And another norm was the creation of and implementation of a information module on logistical services related to foreign trade. And the fourth norm that created the notion of an authorized exporter. And I will look at the details now, and we turn to our next slide. Now, Legislative Decree 1492, this norm requires that the processes of both the public and private sectors are digitalized, including the possibilities to carry out remote inspections. And this is now being implemented. In parallel to all of this, we have created a module for the exchange of information that made it possible to digitalize the services provided by the maritime sector. And this norm makes it easier to ensure transparency in the area of maritime trade in goods. So this is the first norm. Next slide, please. The second norm that I referred to is the creation of an information module related to logistical services and foreign trade. And this platform, the users can find information related to the description of different services, the state of the service, and what services are provided by the trade operators. This helps ensure traceability of all services in the logistics market, and also non-compliance leads to punishment. And this module is located in the single window for foreign trade. Next slide, please. Also, we have seen a significant progress in in the area of certificates of origin. Now we have an interoperability related to certificates of origin with the Alliance of the Pacific, with Colombia, Mexico, Colombia, and Chile. And also we have seen progress in this area directly with Colombia and with Mexico. Also, we've created the notion of the authorized exporter. An exporter can also produce his or her own certificate of origin without needing any need to certify this by a higher authority. Next slide. And refers to the fourth standard that I want to talk about. It relates to the strengthening of our services provided through the single window. And this is the project called VUSE 2.0. All this related to the single window and new services that are being provided. As I referred to the port community, also a system of management of special economic zones located in Peru, and a marketplace, a logistics observatory, and also an entity for monitoring markets and foreign trade. The next slide. So we have now a new design for the single window, and it now can be accessed through a mobile application. And also we have redesigned the processes of all the entities related to the single window. And this is something that we are continuing to development, and we have the involvement in this work of private and public entities. Next slide, please. In addition to these normative measures, also the National Committee is playing a leading role in the development and implementation of 4 important projects related to international cooperation. We have a special project related to the improvement of the health sector, Se Competitivo, and the improvement of the related to the Organization of American States sanitary system, and also health warnings and other work. The second important project is the program for the empowerment for national committees for trade facilitation. It helps in a coordinated way to carry out reforms related to trade facilitation, and helps us bring the through the full application of the measures that were taken during the pandemic. And we also have 2 projects with APEC and with Global Alliance related to better controls of the sanitary situation. Next slide. Can you please wrap up your presentation because of time? Thank you. Yes, of course. Yes, now my conclusions. What was the impact of these measures? The modernization of the processes, improvement of the transparency of the logistics sector and foreign trade, and related to the digitalization of different processes, and the progress that this helped us achieve, the reduction of avoidable costs in the logistics chain, making them more visible, the services that are being provided by trade operators. Also, the quality of services was improved, of course, and on the basis of all of this information, reports and analysis will be carried out related to the logistics sector. And the final slide, what are the lessons learned? The elaboration and implementation of these measures required coordination at the multi-sectoral level, as well as agreement between the public and private sectors. Also, it was necessary to ensure an updated legislative framework that is clear for all operators in order for it to be implemented in the correct manner. Also, it was necessary to ensure coordination of teams working at the national level in order to deal with all the problems that relate to foreign trade throughout the country, and also new technologies should be introduced. So that is all, and I conclude my presentations. Thank you. I thank you, Ingrid, for your very interesting presentation. Obviously, single window in foreign trade is indeed something that simplifies the work in foreign trade. So thank you very much, Ingrid. Now I'd like to give the floor
to the director of the Department of Customs and Inland Revenue in Vanuatu, Mr. Harold Tarosa. Harold, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Moderator, thank you for this opportunity for Vanuatu to share its experiences in terms of its responses to COVID-19 crisis. My name is Harold Tarosa. I am currently the head of Customs and Tax Administration in Vanuatu, and I currently sit in as the chair for the National Trade Facilitation Steering Committee, which is a subsidiary committee to the National Trade Development Committee. For those of us who may have no idea or little information about Vanuatu, is a small island state in the South Pacific, consists of 83 islands, stretching of over 1,300 kilometers across its archipelago. We have a population size of 307. Vanuatu acceded WTO back in 2012. The trade policy framework that is currently under implementation provides a framework for trade facilitation component within the overarching trade policy framework, and is established back in 2008 and has a revised version in 2017. The National Trade Facilitation Steering Committee was established prior to WTO DFA ratification. It was established back in 2017 and undertake the work of coordinating all our cross-border trade agencies that were involved, streamlining of procedures, simplifying and harmonizing all our not only customs procedures, but as well as other government agencies and private sector stakeholders involved in this cross-border trade business in Vanuatu. Thanks to our partners as well, we are currently being supported by the European Development Fund to support our supply side constraints, to assist our farmers in terms of increasing the level of production at the rural areas and supplying them to urban markets, and even as well as exporting them to overseas market. So Vanuatu is very vulnerable to these natural disasters. In the midst of this COVID-19 pandemic, we were severely hit by a number of natural disasters as well, namely the cyclone Harold, who affected us in 2020. We also have volcanic ashes and also eruptions and floods and earthquakes that are currently affecting us. Sea level rise is also an ongoing existential threat that our low-lying islands are currently faced with. And amidst all these natural disasters, one good thing about Vanuatu is that people still smile and still maintain the resiliency, and in terms of being more pragmatic in terms of our adaptation and mitigation measures into these climate change issues. Vanuatu proved itself to be COVID-free over the last 2 years. We had a number of cases, but we managed to deal with them at the border, utilizing our strict inbound arrival procedures. So we currently have a rollout of vaccination going out for rural populations. And some of the requirements we currently put in place is for people to be fully vaccinated with at least one negative PCR test done 72 hours prior to departing from a foreign port into Vanuatu. Now, our current clearance, health clearance certificates are provided by Ministry of Health. We currently require people to spend 14 days in quarantine before they are released into the general public for them to go out of quarantine. And all of this has been made possible through the legal frameworks that we have. We are very fortunate to have a strong legal framework that is been prescribed in our constitution that give us that legal mandate to declare state of emergencies. And I think that is one good thing about the governance framework that has been established under this legal framework, so that we can exercise some of these powers to see how we control the people coming in and people going out, as well as vessels coming in for our trades in terms of our imports and exports. And I think in a way this is something that has enabled us to continue boosting our economic growth. The government has rolled out a number of stimulus packages to enable us to beef up the slowdown in the economy. The government has passed legislations to provide support to our local businesses whom may have closed down, transport sector as well as shipping, and even for production of local commodities such as copra, cocoa, and even kava that has been produced in the rural areas and brought over to the urban markets, and even for export. Amidst this pandemic, the government even launched its first ever export development program. And that is something that we have seen has been able to be undertaken as a result of this response that we were able to contain and prevent COVID-19 from transmitting into our local population. So I think the platform that has enabled us for agencies to connect together in this time of pandemic is also, in a way, has enabled us to reduce the cost of doing business and enhance opportunities for our business people. We have introduced this single window platform as part of our trade policy framework, which has clearly identified that in the case of Vanuatu, by implementing an electronic single window platform, most of the categories of commitment under the WTO TFA would have been complied with. So that is an area that Vanuatu has embarked on, thanks to how development partners, the likes of Enhanced Integrated Framework, EIF, and UNDAT, as well as the Government of Australia and the Government of New Zealand, has enabled us to work on the electronic single window platform to enable connectivity. And I must say, really commend that Vanuatu has really come up with a model that I think best fit small island economies that we know cost of doing business is very big, and the ease of doing business is also a challenge for us, not only for foreign investors, but also for our rural population who would want to do business. This has been a huge concern to us when we started to roll out the stimulus package announced by the government, most of the requirements are such that businesses have to have a business license. And that is something that enables all the rural farmers to now obtain a formal business permit that can legally be registered and enable them to operate, and as well as access government subsidies to support their business in times of this pandemic crisis. So I think that's the successful story in the case of Vanuatu. I think that is as much as chair of the trade facilitation, we can provide as an update or response to the way Vanuatu is addressing its COVID-19 prevention and containment measures, and the impacts of the way we've seen boosting our economic growth even within this global pandemic of COVID-19. Thank you very much, Your Excellency.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Harold, for this very good presentation and sharing the experience of Vanuatu as a small island economy. Vanuatu is a member of WCO already since 2009. And of course, we have seen a lot of reform and progress since then, and congratulations on that for you. So now I will pass over the floor to our next speaker. She is Ms. Sylvia Schauke, Risk Manager at the Zimbabwe Revenue Authority. Sylvia, the floor is yours. Thank you.
First of all, I would like to thank, I would like to say good day to you all, wherever you are, whether it's morning, afternoon, evening. And I would like to thank UNCTAD for giving me this opportunity to participate in this very important global conference. And due to time constraints, I will give an overview of trade facilitation in emergency situations and crisis, measures implemented, challenges faced, and lessons learned in the COVID-19 era in Zimbabwe for the period that I did a rapid scan from July to October 2021. We can move to the next slide, Jillian. There's the presentation outline. I'll move to the next slide, to the background, for the sake of time. Jillian, William, can you move to the next slide? As a background, a rapid scan of trade facilitation preparedness in times of crisis was done in Zimbabwe under the expert guidance of UNCTAD from July to October 2021, with the major purpose being to guide UNCTAD in its thrust to support developing and less developing countries to respond better to future crises, such as the current COVID-19. The major focus areas were measures and regulations pertaining to trade and transit to mitigate the effects of emergencies and crises such as COVID-19. And also challenges and benefits presented to cross-border trade, supply and value chains affected by those measures and regulations. The rapid scan also aimed at understanding the effectiveness of the measures and the lessons learned and recommendations made were noted, and an action plan was formulated. Next slide, please, Julian. Next slide, the introduction is, I think I've already covered it. Next slide, so that we catch up on time. Yes, the declaration by His Excellency, the President of Zimbabwe, of COVID-19 as a formidable epidemic in March 2020 set the tone of the agency, triggered and put into motion the key activities aimed at dealing with this pandemic. There was Statutory Instrument 77 of 2020 which was promulgated as regulations for COVID-19 prevention, containment, and treatment to stimulate and legalize the enforcement of all the measures that were implemented to fight the pandemic. And one of the measures was, the first measure, I think, was the national lockdown, which included border closures and for non-essential travel. Another measure was the formulation of the national preparedness response strategy following the establishment of a high-level structures, which included the Interministerial Committee and the National COVID-19 Response Task Force. Another measure was the COVID-19 stimulus package and fiscal resource mobilization, the relaxation of procurement guidelines by the Procurement Regulatory Authority of Zimbabwe, relief of customs duty and tax on importation of essential medical and related goods, border and international airports closure with cross-border transportation of food, basic goods, medical supplies being exempted. And virtual and online services was one of the measures. We also had designation of truck stops for transit goods vehicles. And in customs, we reviewed ASCUDA selectivity parameters to allow at least 75% of the declarations to be routed to the green channel for assessment. Next slide, please. Some of the, okay, next slide. I think I've already covered that. Okay, some of the benefits from the measures implemented and regulations were the declaration of COVID-19 as a national disaster boosted channels for collaboration and coordination amongst the various stakeholders, including international relief agencies. It also provided a basis for fiscal resource mobilization and stimulus measures to boost supply of goods and medicines to fight COVID-19. Donations of COVID-19 vaccines were received to kickstart the vaccination program, which is underway. And there were also removal of procurement bottlenecks and increased participation of smaller firms in the supply chain. There was further development and strengthening of the health sector. And we also saw the increased use of virtual and digital platforms as some of the benefits. Next slide, please. There was business continuity guaranteed in the wake of the pandemic. For example, we ended up having these virtual meetings like our regular AEO accreditation and committees, risk management committees, in customs, HS committees. We had to do the virtual meetings and ensure that there was business continuity. One of the other benefits is increased investment in technology across the board in all maybe cross-border regulatory agencies. Then we had a boost in information availability through the existing conduct and inquiry points, although I want to mention at this point that we still need to do a lot in terms of these inquiry points because they are still very few. There was increased awareness in the gravity of the COVID-19 and the awareness of the WHO protocols. Pre-clearance helped decongest ports of entry and boosted compliance with customs regulations. It stimulated the benefits. One of the benefits is the stimulation of growth of manufacturing industry, particularly those that manufacture PPEs and related goods. And ultimately, the slowing down of the morbidity and mortality rates in the country is evidenced by statistics, which I don't have right now, but you can search for those statistics on the website. The major challenges that were faced during the COVID-19 is one of them is that not enough notice was given for the lockdown, hence traveling public were caught unaware, lack of coordination sometimes due to poor communication amongst stakeholders. The border closures negatively disrupted they disrupted the supply chain in general. There was increased use in undesignated crossing points due to the border closures. And there was lack of adequate resources to access virtual services in some sectors, particularly the vulnerable and the informal traders. We also had instability of network connectivity as one of the major challenges, resulting in disruption of service delivery sometimes. Then the usual challenge which has always been there, which is now being addressed, is the inadequate physical infrastructure at our ports of entry. And also the national trade facilitation could not meet as often as it had scheduled due to the pandemic. I'll move on to the lessons learned.
And with this, can we just please wrap up, Sylvia? Thank you.
Okay. There was lack of consultation before some laws were passed, and informal and cross-border traders were affected. Some fees were not published, hence these traders were not aware of them. Some statutory instruments, which are the legal instruments, are written in technical and legislative jargon, which is not easy to comprehend and sometimes difficult to implement. And the use of technology was hampered by lack of equipment and knowledge of relevant skills. And we move on to the recommendations and way forward. As I wrap up, there's need to have a clear understanding of the mandates and processes carried out by the various cross-border regulatory agencies. And there's also need for consultation and continued engagement. The rapid and proactive response teams should be inclusive and more visible, and wider consultations should be done before regulations are processed. And government is urged to further invest in ICT infrastructure to provide uninterrupted internet services. And there should be increased awareness on digital platforms to augment the existing clearance processes already in customs. And there's also need to enhance cross-border agency cooperation and management with neighboring countries. And our websites in the cross-border regulatory agencies need continuous updating. I thank you for your active listening. This comes to the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sylvia, for sharing the Zimbabwe experience. No doubt there are very clear lessons learned, benefits of using technology and so on, but still many challenges in infrastructure, connectivity, and others that still need to be overcome. Now I I will give the floor to the CEO of Trademark East Africa, Mr. Frank Matzert. He will talk about the Safe Trade Emergency Facility. And Frank, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. And I hope you can hear me fine from Nairobi. Greetings, everybody. Hope you're really well. I'm just going to beam up my presentation now, if that's okay. I hope you can all see that. There we go. Is that okay, Ricardo? You can see? Okay, I hope so. All right, well, look, thanks so much for the invite today, and delighted to be able to kind of share the experience. Just to say something really fast about Trademark East Africa. We're a multi-donor facility that's been going now 12 years here in East Africa, and we now operate across 12 countries in Africa. And when the pandemic hit, we thought, you know, how as a trade program, trade facilitation program, how can we really help the region try to recover from the pandemic. So we created this program called the Safe Trade Program, safe as in medically compliant. The program was around $31 million, and I really sincerely thank our donors and partners for making it a success. And I think we won an award for this from the Paris Peace Forum. So what did we try to do? Well, I mean, pretty simply, to try to keep trade going so that livelihoods and job losses and livelihoods could be protected, job losses minimized. And what we tried to do was really to roll out the program over quite a wide geography. Altogether, I think it was about 12 countries, the East African community, the DRC, Ethiopia, Somaliland, Djibouti, Malawi, Mozambique, and Zambia. And broadly, it had 3 pillars. And the first was really to try to support keeping borders and ports open so that critical supply chains could continue, supporting and ensuring food security, and then supporting measures to reduce job losses. And I'm going to do this at some speed. What we learned quite early on working with the governments is that a really wide network of partnerships was required to deliver this. And particularly working with the African Union, with the East African community, IGAD, the private sector, and then also with a lot of UN agencies, particularly UNOPS, WFP, IOM, I could go on, but a lot, and all the different partner states. We were very lucky. Sorry, let me turn my volume. We were very lucky to have quite wide and broad base of support from our donor partners, which I'd really like to thank them, particularly the European Union, that was the biggest contributor. And then strategic partnerships, as I was saying, with AMREF, UNOPS, IOM. So it really required thinking beyond the box of the normal trade facilitation armory that we had. It broadly, I don't want to make it too complicated, but broadly there were 7 bits of this program. The first was really to get PPE or personal protective equipment out, particularly to border agencies. We worked with a lot of the Revenue Authority and Customs, thinking then about how technology could be harnessed. I mean, Zimbabwe just talked about that. I thought that was really interesting. Trade policy interventions, thinking hard about keeping supply chains going, standards and SPS issues, advocacy and gender. And I think, you know, a lot of the informal trade at the borders was really badly affected because borders were largely closed. So all those, mainly women traders, lost their livelihoods, and we tried to help get that moving. So in terms of the program, a lot of it was focused, as I said, on PPE. And here it was very much about trying to get PPE to the border officials because, you know, quite quickly in the pandemic, border officials were badly affected. People died. It was really bad. So what we did was kind of support customs to get PPE out to border users, border communities, worked with immigration, the health workers, the port health, and also testing. And testing was really important because when truck drivers arrived at borders, they generally needed to have, you know, PCR tests that were negative. And these are the sort of equipment. There was quarantine facilities, masks, the usual thing, but also infrared thermometers. And we sourced about 95% of the equipment from East Africa for East Africa. And that, I think, was a real achievement. Then thinking about how technology could be used, there was a truck driver tracking app, which now has 113,000 drivers registered. It's called the Regional Electronic Cargo and Driver Tracking System. There's a catchy title if ever there was one. But essentially, what's really interesting is this helped to track truck drivers, make sure that they were medically compliant when they reached the borders. There was a lot of fake certificates initially, but the blockchain technology that was utilized basically helped with the transparency. And I think this has really helped keep our borders open in East Africa, and I think was quite a big achievement, and it was profiled on CNN. The other stuff that we did was obviously on trade policy and working with the East African community. A lot of good support from UNCTAD. I really want to recognize that. And this was really trying to think hard about protocols for border clearances, working with border officials, the port health, and also thinking about the administrative guidelines. The EAC was very progressive in coming up with modus operandi and what they call administrative guidelines. And as I said, we worked with UNCTAD. I'll share this presentation so you get the detail. The next bit was really around supply chains. And we worked with the Kenyan Private Sector Alliance, KEPSA, here in Kenya, but with the private sector in other places. And also with the freight forwarding fraternity to make sure that food supplies were there and e-commerce helped to cushion the impact in terms of businesses. Also worked quite hard in terms of trying to keep export supply chains moving. And this was particularly with horticulture, where there were problems with air freight initially. Tourism obviously was badly hit and still continues, but it is slowly recovering. The other work we did was on SPS and standards, particularly trying to work, for example, with PPE, but also trying to make sure that the different standards bureaus could really have the equipment and the testing capability to look at the various equipment. And then advocacy, quite a lot of work in terms of working with the private sector. We worked with the East African Business Council based in Arusha, particularly trying to get rid of the difficult problem of huge truck and backlog of trucks at the borders. And here's a picture of the 65-kilometer tailback that was initially caused by the borders being closed. And we obviously tried very hard with various industry groups to keep trade moving. And I think, generally, particularly in the East African community, that has been something that's generally worked reasonably well. Okay, and then finally, in terms of the livelihoods on women traders, what we found was, hundreds of thousands of women traders just lost their livelihoods because borders were closed. Often they didn't have the money to be tested, couldn't move across borders. So we worked with the officials at various border points to think about what we called safe trade zones, which were medically compliant markets for cross-border trade. And there's some pictures here of one of the cross-border markets in Somaliland, at the border between Somaliland, which is part of Somalia, and Ethiopia at a place called Togwachale. And it's amazing the kind of impact that had on sustaining livelihoods. And there's just a picture of that. So I guess some of the lessons that we've learned here, and I haven't got a slide on this, but it's in the full deck. First of all, when dealing in trying to keep trade open at a regional level, it was really important to take a corridor approach and to try to work with the regional institutions to have a combined approach where medical testing was agreed between the different partner states. It also meant working with new institutions, particularly Port Health, in quite a lot more detail than normal. And sometimes the aim of, basically ensuring medical safety was at odds with keeping trade moving. So that, I think, was really important. There was also the harmonization of testing, which still proves to be difficult, and the use of digital platforms to try to overcome, really the problems of movement of goods, e-commerce. And finally, as I said, I personally think the work done working with the small trader communities, particularly at the borders, was very important in terms of sustaining livelihoods. They're often the forgotten, heroes of trade or heroines, and essentially, creating some quite simple protocols to allow them to move was very important. So just say the Safe Trade program, we're drawing into the longer term programming with our partners. And it's also now turned into a mass vaccination program that we're working with governments on for the truck drivers to ensure trade keeps moving. So sorry to do that quickly, but I hope that was useful.
Indeed, Frank. Thank you very much. It was useful, and thank you for being such a good timekeeper with this presentation. So I have been told by the organizers, by Julian, that we will be able to take just 2 or 3 questions. So we are going over a little bit of the time established for this panel, but keep it up with us. Just a couple of questions that we might get. And I see the first one, and this one is for Peru, Ingrid. It says, in your single window application, how do you sustain the application? Who funds it, holds the maintenance, development of your single window? Again, what is the role of the private sector in this single window? Ingrid, can you take 2 minutes to respond to this question, please? Thank you.
Sí, muchas gracias por la consulta. En realidad, todos los componentes que actualmente...
All of the components that are developed through the single window, as well as the new elements that we are working or now doing in the second version of this project, enjoy the full participation of those who are involved. We analyzed what are the needs of potential users and to see whether they're satisfied with all the new components. In the single window, there is actually a specific committee, an operational committee, where all users can express their doubts related to how the system functions and problems that may occur during the use of the single window. And this is separate from the national committee. So we have a more political, technical space, and then we have a more technical committee. And there's also direct participation of users in the creation of the single window. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ingrid. Very interesting. And I think for our cooperation, the cooperation is crucial for the system to function. Thank you for your answer.
And I think it's addressed to Zimbabwe, Sylvia. It says Zimbabwe has indicated that during pandemic, systems were put in place to route 75% of goods through the green line. The participant is asking to share the percentage of goods which previously traversed this green line and what are the major challenges that this new measure posed. Sylvia, if you could give us an answer within a two-minute time frame. Thank you. Is Sylvia still connected? Yes, I see her. Sylvia. Yes, thank you.
Okay, I was having challenges. Now I can even not unmute the video. Okay, I was having challenges unmuting, but I missed the initial part of the question. The first part of the question, if I can have it again.
Sure, it says Zimbabwe has indicated that during the pandemic, systems were put in place to route 75% of goods through the green line. The question is, what is the percentage of goods which previously passed through this green line, and what were the major challenges that this new measure posed for Zimbabwe Revenue Authority?
Okay, thank you. I will quickly respond, but it's not the precise percentage, but it was roughly around 50%. Why I say so is we used to have our declarations about 10 to 15% going to the red channel, and some 25% going to the yellow channel. Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, so I would say roughly it was around 50% would go to the green channel, although I don't have the exact figure, but just judging on what was going to the red and the yellow channel, I would say 50%. And the major challenges with the goods or being channeled to the red channel and the yellow lane, the majority of them, let's say 50%, is we don't have the manpower We didn't have, even before COVID, we had very little manpower to carry out the physical examinations. And we're still with the COVID situation where we had to stagger coming to the office. We had to streamline and make sure that only a few people would report and maybe even access the ASCUDA world and do physical examinations. I don't know if I've answered the question now.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sylvia. And in any case, we remind speakers and participants, there is the chat open there. The organizers have just informed that the presentations will be shared. And of course, if there are any more questions, you can place them in the chat. For the last question, because of time restraints, this one is to Harold from Vanuatu. The question is, were there any negative feedback from the international community in response to the strict COVID-19 measures? How did you overcome this? Harold, the floor is yours in a couple of minutes, please. Thank you. Do we still have Harold? Well, there are other questions, interesting questions. Unfortunately, the time does not allow us to go through all of them. But there are some general ones, like how can we take advantage of the problems and pressures imposed by COVID-19 and turn them into goals that serve to facilitate trade? I might say that here customs administrations, trade authorities, international organizations have been working very hard in actually converting these challenges into objectives, into realities, into solutions. I might just take the opportunity to highlight that, for instance, the WCO, together with its 184 members, has taken on several concrete actions regarding, for instance, establishing a repository of members' good practices to mitigate the effects of the pandemic. This was a very clear action towards communication, transparency, and sharing information. I think, again, collaboration is very important into turning these challenges into objectives, into concrete solutions. In terms of movement of vaccines, for instance, the December 2020 Council of the WCO adopted a resolution on the role of customs to facilitate the cross-border movement of critical medicines and vaccines. And this was a challenge that became a commitment and became a goal and an objective that was then clarified in a very concrete plan towards deliverables and trying to facilitate the access to vaccines. Something that was very much appreciated by members and economic operators was, since the start of the crisis, the HS, the Harmonized System Classification References that the WCO issued for medical supplies, medicines, medical substances, and vaccines. And this was a list of essential goods that was developed together with the World Health Organization and published in our website, and was very much welcome. Among other actions like joint operations to also combat illicit trade that was related to goods of that were supposed to mitigate the effects of the pandemic. But unfortunately, when we call for more facilitation, sometimes the organized crime is also taking advantage of these facilitation measures, and customs has the responsibility, of course, the objective of also protecting society and also tackling and combating this illicit trade. So there are many examples that can be shown. I think today the speakers were very, very clear and very transparent and had a very good communication and very good examples on how to turn challenges into good experiences and into solutions. And I congratulate all of them for these experiences. I thank you again for sharing today this information. It has been a pleasure and honor to moderate this panel, and I appreciate the organizers for this very important and successful event. Thank you, participants. Thank you, speakers. And I give the floor back to Julian so that he can wrap up and continue to the next phase. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ricardo. And from my side, I just would like to thank again all our panelists today. And thank you so much for your interesting presentations. Thank you, Ricardo Treviño, for being our moderator today. And I would like to ask you all to please respond a poll that we will launch right now in the screen. So it's just one question. And then also I would like to ask you to stay 1 or 2 more minutes connected with us, because on the screen you will see a design made by Peter Molly, our designer here for this session, which cover all the topics discussed in a very interesting and fresh way of see these topics. So I would like to invite you all to stay a little bit connected and explore this drawing. It's very interesting, very new, super well done. And also please just respond this small question so we can see if this session was useful for you in the extent that we expect it was. Also, I would like to invite you all to continue tune with us tomorrow. Tomorrow we will have 2 super interesting main sessions. So again, remember that the forum continue. And that's all from my side. Again, thank you so much, panelists, and Ricardo for being our moderator today. Thank you all my colleagues for being here. Thank you all the interpreters, and thank you all for being here, all the participants. So good afternoon, and please stay tuned reading the interesting drawing that we're showing on the screen. Thank you so much.